from the Fixes In, which is your last record.
Yeah.
I would like to know what is influenced by, and if you have. I know that you have involved different musicians for this record. So.
Yeah, well, it was actually recorded quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
And the musicians, they're all from New York. Mostly guys that I've played with for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's a very different thing from the Contortions because it's much more jazz influenced, and another big influence on it is film noir movies.
Yeah. So let's go back. We have to do some questions about your past. How did you first enter music? Is there something nice about your classical training?
Well, I wouldn't really call it classical, but I started playing piano when I was 7 years old, and I was taking lessons with nuns.
Yeah.
Because I went to Catholic.
Did you play in church? Or
no, not really. No, I didn't play. But I was an altar boy.
Okay.
And I also sang in a boys' choir, which was the most horrible sounding choir you ever heard. Yeah, because I was just taking lessons with these nuns, and it was sort of classical, not really even classical music, just stuff they write for kids to play,
Okay.
But then when I was about 12 or 13, I took some lessons with a old guy at a music store who was teaching me to play like old standards and a little bit of jazz.
Then you got into rock and roll.
Yeah, then I got into rock and roll.
In black music.
Just as a fan, I didn't really have that experience of most kids of playing like in a garage band. I didn't really ever do that. I just loved rock and roll just as a fan, and
I read that the contortion comes from the name comes from all the groups that you wanted to name that remembered.
Well, partly it comes because it sounds like the Temptations.
Yeah,
that's like that. But also it comes from when I first was about the first year I was in New York. I played a jazz concert with this sort of free jazz big band. And the writer Robert Palmer, he did a review of this thing, and he said that I was doing a contortionist act instead of music, because I went out in the audience and I was walking around and going down on my knees in front of people with my sax, and he called it a contortionist act.
Okay.
And that's where I got the idea. Really got the idea for the contortion.
The name.
Yeah.
So you dancing while playing sax or piano or moving from one to another. How was in the late 70s be one of the few artists who liked disco music? How was at that time?
Well, at that time disco was so big, you couldn't avoid it. It was like everywhere.
Yeah, but I mean about CBGB, all that scene.
Yeah, a lot of people at like the CBGB scene, they had this big hate of disco. I was never that crazy about disco, but I didn't hate it either. And there were some things I liked about it, but I probably kind of exaggerated how much I liked it, just because it made people mad,
Okay. A few months ago, we had an interview with Lydia Lunch, who was saying that they thought that, I think she was speaking about all the no-wave scene, more or less, but I'm asking you, that they thought that the CBGB bands were a bit silly. How was your attitude towards that scene?
Well, I don't know what she meant by which. I mean, I would have to know which bands she was.
She was talking about Blondie. I'm for sure.
Silly. I don't know. I don't know if I'd say
in
they were silly.
In general, your attitude, your.
Well, I liked most of those bands, but I didn't. I thought they were a little conservative for my tastes. Most of them. That I wanted to do music that was a lot more radical. Because they basically weren't doing much that was really musically, as far as they, and I wanted to just throw away the regular chord progressions and everything that everyone used, and do something really different.
Okay.
But I liked the bands, one thing I liked was that each one of those bands, like Blondie or Television or Ramones, they all had a very strong concept, like they all had their own style, the way they looked and everything. It all fit in to their idea, and each one was unique in their own way. Even if I wasn't that crazy about the actual music, I was very impressed by that.
Okay. You always have your hair combed, and I know that sometimes you used to change your dress during the gigs. So do you think that the look is important? You were slightly talking about the CBGB scenes, because I think you were also talking about the look, the way they appeared. So do you think it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing that kind of turned me off about jazz after a while, was that the musicians didn't care about the way they looked. I always think that music should have some kind of theatrical element to it.
On stage,
yes,
especially.
If you're on stage and you're entertaining people, you should look sharp, or at least you should look different, or say something with the way you look and present yourself, not just any old thing,
One thing that we can't avoid to talk about is your confrontational attitude to the audience. But what about the violence? Were you attracted by violence, and how were you out of the stage? Were you that way as well?
Well, the way it started wasn't something that I planned. It was just because the original audience that was coming to see the contortions were mostly like Soho artist types. And they were they had a very superior attitude, They thought that they were really cool, and that nothing could shock them. And I just decided to do something that would really shock them. And also because they weren't, they didn't move, Nobody in New York danced.
Was dancing, yeah.
The clubs didn't even have dance floors, and that really irritated me, and then they were even sitting on the floor, and that really made me mad. So that was what originally got me to attack people, was because they were sitting on the floor. I just couldn't tolerate that.
Okay. So it wasn't about violence. It was something.
It wasn't about violence for its own sake.
Okay.
Or just having fights for the fun of it. It was about trying to get a reaction out of people. But then later it did kind of begin spilling over into my real life, and that's when I decided to stop doing it.
Okay. Now you're just dancing on the stage.
Well, you never know.
And drinking Baileys.
You can't ever be completely sure. Well, I might do something.